And good evening, and welcome to An Hour with the Candidates, also known as Candidates Corner, a production of LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a project sponsored by the Libertarian Party's Libertarian National Committee. My name is Pat Ford. I am your host. I'm also the chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. This evening, we've got a very special guest. Every week, we have very special guests. The purpose of this show is to give libertarians around the country an opportunity to meet local/down ballot candidates. Over the last few weeks, we've been focusing on folks who have won elections as well as folks who are instrumental in supporting and developing and training the infrastructure necessary for the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian philosophy, the Libertarian movement to train and develop candidates, as we like to say, to win higher office and then leave everyone alone. We came to an executive decision a few weeks ago. We no longer use the term governing. We've replaced it with the concept of stewardship. And that'll be our philosophy as we go into the new year. As we talk to folks who are considering, folks who have run before and won, and their efforts to both engage in stewardship and project a positive image of the libertarian movement, as well as engage in stewardship in the manner of a libertarian. And then we'll have folks on, hopefully on a recurring basis like tonight, an individual who's been instrumental through sheer force of will and the support of the party in developing winning candidacies literally around the country. For the very first time, shockingly enough, Apollo Pazell, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot, Pat. I appreciate it.
Now, in full disclosure, a certain someone who had won a major election, a major victory, and a real proof of concept to what we're going to discuss tonight was going to join us. He, however, had a last-minute emergency. We always want to remember, as hard as we all work, as dedicated we all are to the movement/philosophy/party, family always comes first. So Marshall Burt, I hopefully will be joining us next week, and we'll get him and get his perspective on being the first libertarian elected to a General Assembly/state senatorship in a generation. But Apollo, let's talk tonight about the Frontier Project.
Happy to.
But before we get started in that, I think, Apollo Pazell, you're sort of a man of mystery in this party. And, folks have certainly heard about your exploits. Certainly folks have seen your successes in action. You do a wonderful job of being accessible and making to the party available the ongoing struggles, efforts, often Herculean, at getting libertarians elected, but they very often haven't had a chance to meet you personally. So I have to ask you the question that I ask every week. Apollo Pazell, what was your libertarian moment in your life? And give us your libertarian story and how you got involved in politics, and how we've reached this point where you are spearheading a major effort for the Libertarian Party.
All right. That is a very big question, but I was working. My moment of liberty was I was working for another presidential candidate in 2012 from one of the old parties, and when that primary ended, I started to look around for other opportunities, and I was contacted by a man named Ron Nielsen, who lived in my state and was hiring. Folks for a campaign that was not disclosed in the outreach, and so I drove up there and I took the interview and answered a lot of questions, went back and forth for a little bit, and finally says, "Well, we work for Gary Johnson. Do you know who that is?" And I said, "The guy of the shovel and dog poop in the debate. Yeah, I think I know who he is."
Right.
They said, "Well, we would like to hire you to for that campaign." Because at the time Gary was in the Republican primary as well.
Right.
So I was taken aback and thought, well, Gary Johnson still has a campaign. I'm pretty sure there's only about 6 states left in the primaries. And he says, no, he's running as a libertarian. I knew what the Libertarian Party was, but it was never on my radar as a possible career path switch. But I decided to take the job. It was intriguing. It was close to home. I didn't have any other clients. I was, planning on working a presidential campaign, and so I decided that I would give it a shot. So I joined that campaign, and very quickly got to immerse myself in the libertarian philosophy, of which I knew about as a student of political science, but I wasn't very well versed, and got to meet a lot of folks, and I fell in love with the people of the party. That's I remember the very first person that I was tasked with calling she's not very active now, but a lot of old other folks might know her. Jillian Mack was the first person I was tasked to call, and they were just friendly, welcoming, and they believed in the cause. They believed in the principle, the principles that they were espousing, and that was so different than the politics that I was used to. It was about changing politics. It was about changing the world and the country. It wasn't about winning or beating the other team. I mean, partially because we really hadn't experienced that, but there was a passion for the principles that drew me there. My history, what brought me to politics, was I started working I worked for other parties, but I've always been a libertarian. I was brought into politics because I started lobbying my local state legislators at the age of 14 to not extend a smoking ban in public spaces. I don't know why I cared about that. I didn't smoke. I've never smoked, but it just caught my attention. And so I lobbied the state legislature on it. And I was a youngster, and I was invited up by not my representative, and they introduced me to my representative who was running for re-election, and she asked if I would help on her campaign. I eventually became her campaign manager, and she won pretty handily. And that's where I caught the bug for politics.
It is a bug, right? It's
yes.
The rock and roll fever and the boogie woogie flu is probably predating you, but I got to throw out that reference. It is all consuming. It takes us away from our families. Yet at the same time, I think a lot of us still have optimism, as cynical and crusty as old guys like me can be, because there's a nobility, if you will, in attempting to rescue, and at this point in this country's history, I literally mean rescue, this nation from what politics has sort of morphed into. Politics used to be something that had at least grand aspirations, at least me growing up in the 60s and 70s, where there was an opportunity to literally do good, to improve a lot in people's lives, to give people freedom, to break the bonds of everything from literal racism to economic racism. All of those were still possibilities, and there was even times in the conservative movement when Ronald Reagan spoke about the shining city on the hill and it's morning in America. Now it's morning in America, but with a whole slightly different spelling. The Frontier Project.
Yes.
So many folks, we were chatting this afternoon briefly. So many folks understand the general concept. And that's not because of anything, say, a shortage of attempt to communicate it, but it is ephemeral in a sense. On a basic level, the Frontier Project has targeting, if you will, for the most part, with one or two outliers geographically, but a focused part of the nation, of course, in Wyoming. And they're working hard. You're using your professional skills to organize campaigns, to provide logistical support and training at literally every level. But let's talk about the genesis of the Frontier Project, as well as some of the nuances that we talked about this afternoon in going into the part of the nation you selected, the type of candidate you're pursuing, and the best practices that you're taking from your prior experience and evolving with. Give us that whole lowdown, if you will.
I will. Well, the genesis of the project was, my primary objective has always been to identify. I mean, even from the earliest time in the party, my objective was to find areas where we could have kind of lightning in the bottle catches, where there were opportunities that were hidden, or we just weren't seeing, because the party's it's not that the opportunities aren't there, it's just that the party is small and it has minimal resources, and it's not able to always see them, and we still don't have the ability to see all of our opportunities. But when we do see the opportunities, sometimes it's too little too late, and not very often are we creating our own opportunities. And I was driving back, so I had spent months researching, just poring over data nationwide of opportunities, trying to secure endorsements. That's when I started looking at potentially getting legislators to flip, which we were successful at getting some legislators to flip. which got some news, but it was the taste of what we needed to do. And after the Gary Johnson campaign ended in 2012, I wasn't ready to give up the Libertarian Party. It was my home at that point. And I started to, I spent an entire year taking my evenings researching all of the, every single state House race in the country. I looked at every single one and tried to find trends and areas where we could possibly have an impact. It was pretty easy pretty quickly to see what we had. The first thing we needed to do is look at what our resources were. How many volunteers did we have? How much money did the party raise, both nationally and at the state level combined? How much was the average cost of the per race? All of these things we put together. And then one day I was actually driving back from Colorado from visiting friends, and I stopped for gas in Rock Springs, Wyoming, in a gas station in Dewar Drive. This is actually a fantastic full circle event. I was on Dewar Drive at the gas station, and as I was waiting for my gas to fill, I picked up the Rocket Miner newspaper and I started to read about the local election that was going on. And I was reading about potential candidates and the blue bastion that was Sweetwater County and how demographics were changing. And so I pulled out my phone. I started looking at these House seats, because that's what political nerds do, is they find out what part of the country they're in and start looking at House seats. And the numbers just, I could see some anomalies. I could see some areas where there were some weaknesses. And so I started to write up a plan, and I started submitting it to the LNC starting in 2014. And then by 2018, we were finally able to pull the trigger on it. But turns out that from that day in 2013, when I looked at that newspaper, to today, the first representative that we were elected with the Frontier Project was actually Marshall Burt, who represents that gas station on Dewar Drive in District 39. So that was a pretty fun full circle event that happened this year. But that was the idea. We know we have limited resources. We're a smaller party. We know there are opportunities out there, so let's match the two, find out what we can spend the resources on and be effective with. But we have to be smart. A lot of people, we are not Democrats and Republicans. So if there's an area that's competitive for Democrats and Republicans, what does that mean? It means costs are going to be higher. It means that there's going to be more polarization. It means it's going to be a more negative campaign. And while we have been conditioned to think that the traditionally swing districts are our best opportunities, they in fact end up being so expensive that we're not able to even make a dent. Right. And so we went the other route. We tried to find extremes and find a way to become the alternative to whoever that was.
Well, we'll talk about for a second, when you talk about extremes in terms of expenses, you've got, just a random sampling, if you will, across the nation. You've got state representative and state senatorial races running now into 7 figures.
Yes.
Which is breathtaking, and the most simplistic analogy, of course, is to look at, well, they get paid $3,000 a year. So why would they spend $500,000 to get elected? And it's not, the reasons can be, again, the word of the night, I guess, is nuanced. Some of the reasons are because on a very personal level here in Rhode Island, if you're a lawyer and you work your way up the food chain, if you will, in the General Assembly, it's a hell of a way to build a legal practice, because that's the not so subtle way that people curry favor with lawmakers. They get, and it's legal. These lawmakers get lots of cases, whether they be, personal injury lawyers, estate lawyers, tax lawyers. It's entirely legal to refer them business, I guess. It happens. So that's one reason. The second reason is, in the larger states, the vast amount of money that is under the control if you make it into something like, say, the House Finance Committee. What type of extremes have you seen in terms of the cost of local, if you will, local campaign budgets?
For the high end, you're right. There are states that are getting into the 7 figures. It's rare. Those are mostly in California and New York. Some, I think Illinois got close in a couple this year. But for the most part, what you're looking at is it is very expensive, but across the country, the average has increased, and you're looking at closer to $50,000 to $60,000 for a House seat if you look if you take out the large anomalous states. But that raise alone has priced a lot of people out of this. And that is, it priced us out of the market in many locations. And that's why we need to, change our focus. And instead, so I would say the highest that if the question is the highest I've ever seen, I believe it was a $1.2 million state house race is the highest that I saw. The average in Wyoming, by contrast, it has changed actually, thanks to the Libertarian Party. Bethany actually had one of the most expensive races in Wyoming State House in recent memory this cycle, so it has changed thanks to us. But the average prior to us was about $5,000 to win in the state of Wyoming, which is significantly a better return on investment than most other places. But yeah, the motivation behind it is ego or money.
Right. No, I understood. And you know, when you look at some of the races that we've run in the past, and I'll always use Cara as an example. You know, in Burnsville, Minnesota, the opportunity to provide proof of concept at the next level, where again we don't govern, we steward our individual communities. We act as counselors and advisors and partners with local community members, not dictators, rulers, etc. But the opportunity, once you're in that position, because very often, as we mentioned on the show, you're the very first libertarian that many folks will have ever met. And certainly in many cases, you're the very first libertarian elected to office where you're going to have those opportunities to act as stewards of community resources. So the trade-off, regardless of the size of the community, in terms of proof of concept, is priceless. It's sort of like that MasterCard commercial, you know. It truly is priceless. And again, you know, I always like to lead with Burnsville, Minnesota, but now we have a little town in California where Kalish Mara and a few other folks are starting to facilitate and concentrate power right now. So to be able to springboard to other people who are running to show these successes is critical, I would imagine as well. Correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The narrative, the idea here is shifting the narrative to say that we can win, we can steward, we can steward good government. That is the goal. That's the idea behind this. That once we're able to show that we can win, the excuse isn't there anymore. Because the excuse we receive, anybody who's knocked a door, anybody who's done a phone bank, anybody who's done a text bank, which is a lot of libertarians thanks to this last cycle, any of those people have encountered somebody that tells them, well, they just can't win. The more we're able to change that narrative, the better it is. It's why I really try to avoid talking about spoiling races or things like that. I tend to try to focus on the wins. I try to focus as heavily, you know, the Trish Butlers, the Kalish Maros, Kara Schultz's, the Marshall Burts. You know, the other idea behind this, the other part of this is thinking that libertarians won't be able to, once they get there, they'll be ignored. That has not been the experience that we've had so far with Marshall in the state legislature. I mean, we'll save some of that for next cycle or for the next show. But it's actually been an opportunity for both the old political parties to find a bipartisan partner, so that they can say that this was a bipartisan bill. It's actually been encouraging on that level. Now we still have a lot of fights above us. We'll see if we're able to get anything through. But that's the next fight. You always have to be prepared for what's next, whether it be higher office or you know, Andy Craig. When I was speaking to him, he came to the election night parties. And once we had won, we were talking about, I think we were sitting in the lobby, and at one point I said, "Oh shoot." And he said, "What?" I said, "We have no bills, and the session's in 2 months." And Andy said, "I think that we have a little bit of a dog that caught the car problem, and that's not a bad problem to have."
No, I agree. Not at all. But you know, to address those concerns, we run not to spoil races, but to win, so that we can affect how folks are coalesced with and stewarded, if you will, if that's a word. Number two, we don't steal votes. We merely broaden the base of the voter population and what their primary concerns are and what their philosophy is. And that's a critical point, because we've cast off, I believe, and this project has certainly been a impetus behind it. We've cast off all those sort of negative, failed. I don't want to use a term. I hate to use the word excuses, but that's not the game here anymore.
Right.
It just isn't. We've moved as a party beyond that.
Right.
And so I prefer to look at this, even when those victories don't come. And in a couple of cases, we've been agonizingly close, and it's just agonizingly close. And it's certainly eventually not winning was certainly it was happenstance, I believe. It's just the sheer effort in some of those races was just phenomenal. And now we're talking about over a protracted period of time. But the point is, we run people, A, to win, B, to expand on the philosophy, C, to expand the voter base, and D is an encouragement for both candidates and people and individuals to join the party. That's what is that a fair summation?
Absolutely. We need to increase our base. We need to increase our voter base. Getting elected is one thing. Getting reelected is a totally different animal.
Right.
And in order to do that and to be able to hold the seat so that you can create longevity, so you can start to create a resume, in order to do that, you have to get reelected. And in order to get reelected, you're going to need more voters. You need to close the gap between you and your opponent. You need your persuasion universe to shrink, or you're not going to be able to get over that bump.
Right. No, I understand completely. Talk to me, and I want to get into some of the best practices that have come out of this. And also, a critical point that we started asking candidates a few weeks ago here on this show is, for the folks that have won now, you've got to, in a sense, pivot, and you're moving and it's in a subtle direction. But at the same time, it's a critical point. We now have the individuals who are going to move from getting elected to getting reelected. And that's an entirely different approach that literally begins on day one, when you, or shall we say, the morning after.
Yes.
But talk to me before we pivot the conversation to the importance of the accessibility, the size, the scope of the media markets that you're focusing these races in a manner that's in keeping with the entire approach to the election.
Well, our media market costs, that is one of the factors. So one of the items that we look at when we're gauging opportunity is how much it costs to run a media campaign. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a field guy. My specialty is field. So, of course, I believe fully that we do need to that we need to use digital ad times, or digital ads and radio ads, television ads if possible. But I'm a field guy. But it does come into it, and the range that we were looking at in Wyoming was around $6.40 per unit for a 30-second spot. That was our radio time. Television ads were close to $350 for one 30-second spot during prime time. These are all prime time prices. It's not entirely worth it to buy otherwise. So that was the markets that we were looking at for those. Print media varied. The small newspaper, every small town had their weekly periodical, but very few. There's only one regular circulation, and that is Casper Star Tribune in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. So the ads were slightly, very dramatically. If you were in the Rock Springs area, you were looking at almost twice as much as Riverton, and Riverton was twice as much as Saratoga, and so on and so forth. So the print media varied greatly.
And as important to that is the accessibility and the inexpensive nature of it is, by definition, too, that makes it more of a level playing field, because
correct.
The entrenched political parties are not able to use their vastly larger fundraising machines to essentially block out the sun from media access to local.
Correct.
It's you've got a shot at buying ad time based on your budget. The calculus is completely different than, say, if you're going into, we had some wonderful people running for office in Chicago. And wow, that's got to be, I'm alluding to some of the races, some of the budgets we were talking about, where you've literally got so much money at stake on so many different levels that entrenched interests are able to and let's just say it's not unlike some of the other hyperinflated markets in this nation. If you've got big money willing to spend big money to block out the sun, if you will, from opposing candidates, that's only going to drive the market even higher.
Right.
It's capitalism at its best, and sadly for us, it's capitalism at its most challenging. So, in that sense, you came to the conclusion, based on a series of well-reasoned, well-thought-out, well-analyzed, well-researched indices, that Wyoming was essentially the way to go. Now, you're not from Wyoming, are you?
No, it's my adopted home, but I do love it.
So at this point, it's clear just from following you on the Facebook that you probably have an intimate knowledge of Wyoming, probably heretofore thought impossible by anybody outside of Wyoming. Tell me about the state. I mean, if we've all read about it, we've seen the pictures. It's a spectacular place to live, but what's it really like to live there? What are the people, the politics? Give us a flavor.
It is remote. It is, there's I think I was talking to Fina in California, or not California, in Hawaii the other day. And I told her that I think that Hawaii and Wyoming are sister states because they're both very hard to get to. There are some years where there's weeks at a time where you cannot get to parts of Wyoming. There are snowbirds that leave in massive numbers. So the state is very small. It's a very large state by area. It's a very small state by population. Some stats that are pretty fun to talk about in District 47, where we're working with the candidate. It is the size of the state of Massachusetts, with the population, with the voting population of about 4,000 people. So wow. It's that was rough. It gets cold early. It is a very high elevation. It's much higher than Denver. Almost every single city in Wyoming is a higher elevation than Denver. It's windy. There are 500,000 people. I like to put it into perspective by saying that there's in Denver proper, there are more people than the entire state of Wyoming. Wow. Salt Lake Valley, it would take 2 Wyomings to fill up the Salt Lake Valley. So it's very, very small, 500,000 people, but they're very clustered. There's a saying that they like to say that it's many towns with one long main street, because you can go. It's challenging to campaign there. You go up to Riverton, and they'll look at you like they're just trying to place you. Where have I seen you before? Because they've seen everybody in Wyoming at least once. Right. So they're trying to place you at the door, and then. And then they'll say, well, where are you from? And we told everybody, that we had people living. So whatever city you were living in, just call that your hometown, or just where you're from or where you're coming from. And so we'd say Rock Springs, and they'd say, oh, do you know Bill Smith down there? And you have no idea who that person is. And I'd say, oh, I can't say that I do. And okay, it's very, very close. It's a very close-knit state. The entire state is. They're not a traditional red state. This is one of the reasons that we looked at them. They are rugged individualists. This is there are plenty of folks up there who are very, very devout religious folks. They are less driven in the vote by that than traditional red states. They're cowboys, they're ranchers, they're miners, they're oil well workers. For the majority of their population, I should say. So they are rugged individualists. They're exactly what libertarians are. Their culture is. They have to live on a shoestring budget. Their budget is smaller than most county budgets. The entire state has a $2 billion annual budget or biannual budget. So it's a very small state where people have to decide to live, but it's absolutely gorgeous. 2 wonderful national parks, Teton National Park, Yellowstone National Park. And I like to say that the air is just freer in Wyoming.
There's a commonality now with political issues around the nation because of, as we say here, the dread COVID, that probably didn't exist at any national level, really. I'd have to go back to 9/11 to see that sort of focus on one project. To a degree in 2008, the economy, but COVID obviously has taken up both the imaginations, the fears, and as well as the practical nature of elected office. But before that, and you've spent a couple of years intensively in that part of the country, what were the major concerns and that you ran into as campaign issues? And did you develop an individualized approach about those issues? Because they're still out there with each candidate.
Oh,
or
yeah.
was there sort of a statewide focus that you develop a consensus among the candidates?
In this particular instance, now we did have candidates outside of Wyoming as well. So we crafted the message to whatever the candidate needed. So we developed a message that was based off of polling and what the voters, you're speaking to the voters. The voters need to be the ones that you care about. They're the ones that get to decide. They get to drive the agenda. We don't get to drive the agenda. So it is a lot of polling. Now, luckily, this year we actually kind of dodged COVID. It was Wyoming had a very low. It got to Wyoming late, and it had a very low caseload early on. So they stayed for the entire election. They stayed unlocked. There was no mask mandates. It was almost the opposite. We actually had more events than any time I've ever seen. I mean, it was multiple big citywide events every week. It was an overcompensation almost. It was almost overwhelming for our project's needs. It was a lot of events. So we dodged it the day before the election. Unfortunately, rest in peace. But one of the state legislators passed away the day before election day. And that's when things started to get real in Wyoming. They just recently did a mask mandate that the Wyoming Libertarian Party just passed a letter that they're going to be sending to the governor calling for the end of the lockdowns and the mask mandates. So we luckily dodged that. So the issue that we focused on outside of COVID was taxes. It's all about taxes. Wyoming has no income tax. Wyoming basically subsists on sales tax and property tax. And they've been sold a bill of goods by the establishment in Wyoming. They've been told that they cannot sustain without increasing their taxes. And we showed them that that was not true. From an aggressive Supreme Court, all appointed by Republicans, all registered Republicans, that Supreme Court delivered a legislative decision from the bench that has bound the Wyoming legislature to an impossible task with their education system that has locked them in a cycle that it's going to be almost impossible to get out of without completely restructuring their education system. They're 50%, roughly, approximately 50% of their land is held by the federal government, which does wonders for their tourism industry. But they live off of the severance tax. They live off of the minerals. So if the federal government is not giving leases, or if the leases are not negotiated well, then Wyoming doesn't have a budget. Then Wyoming has no money. And Wyoming got hit not just with COVID this cycle, but they were also hit with the oil collapse, the collapse of the oil industry. At one point during our campaign, there were no more oil wells in Wyoming, and Wyoming is an oil, gas, and coal state. Luckily, it's also uranium, so there is a future in energy still for Wyoming. But that's what we focused on, that they were sold a bill of goods. Wyoming spends $23,000 per family and only takes in $3,000 worth of revenue. They do not have a revenue problem. They have a spending problem, and they won't stop. Marshall Burt's sponsoring legislation that has been drafted and will hit the floor to cut. There's plenty of ways to go through. Right now, any new government building must spend 1% of their entire budget on art. We're working to repeal that. There's waste, there's fraud, there's plenty of abuse in that budget, and there are reforms and innovations that need to be made. So that's what we did. Sorry, I got into campaign mode there.
No, absolutely. No, we're trying to understand the politics of each region for two levels. Number one, so that folks who are thinking about running for office can conceptualize the, if you will, the sameness of those issues. I mean, here we are in Rhode Island. You can't imagine a more different state on every level. We're below sea level, both financially and as well as geographically. And yet, I got into an argument. I would call it an argument. About a 45-second steamy debate at a press conference yesterday with our governor, talking about the 10+% increase in our state budget at a time when my God, the small business community has been eviscerated, while at the same time she's preaching to me, about basically spending our way out of a massive recession, which may work for a country, but the last time I checked, Rhode Island nor Wyoming could print money.
Right.
Just saying, maybe there is our individual branch of the Fed at each state that we can work with, but there's a detachment from reality, which is a distinct, if you will, diametrically opposite viewpoint of the crisis itself. For these states will have you believe, and I take this disease very seriously, by the way. I'll wear a mask during the day. I'm an older guy. I respect this disease. How about that? But for states that are preaching pure fear and seizing upon the opportunity to shut down every business, shut down our way of lives, they turn around when it comes to fiscal responsibility, and it's a split personality. Then all of a sudden, it's just another day, another party. There's this endless supply of money coming from I don't know where. And I think as libertarians, we're quite glib about taxation being theft, and it is. But at the same time, I think we need to take that one step further and educate the public about the real connection between individuals creating wealth and then individuals, that same wealth going to support a limited form of stewardship, not governance, stewardship. And so I would imagine in a very real way, despite the vastly different in congestion and geography, that we're all arguing the same point, aren't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The question is not what our principles stay the same. The question is what issues matter to the public. So the voters tell you what they care about. You provide the libertarian solutions. You provide the liberty, low cost, maximum freedom solutions to improve people's lives, to make the quality of life better. At the end of the day, people want their lives to be better. And you need to provide the libertarian solution to make their lives better that fits the concerns and the issues that matter to them. But yes, ultimately, whether it's Rhode Island, whether it's Florida, whether it's Wyoming, whether it's Guam, the issues are, the principles are the same, even though the issues might vary.
Right. Folks, if you're just joining us, Apollo Pazell is, as we all well know, the guru, the spiritual leader of the Frontier Project, an attempt to create best practices, train candidates, win elections, and by utilizing a part of the country that is accessible, is generally supportive of our core principles, and represents opportunities for, as I like to call it, proof of concept, where libertarians win elections and engage in a libertarian way of stewarding, governing. I'll say that quick. I mean, but it does. And then, as we do in the case of Burnsville, turn around to other parts of the nation, say, here it is. This is what we do. This is how we work with our communities. This is how we run elections. Where, as our former president would say, we are issues orientated. We are interested in solutions, and we are interested in true opportunity, representing what we like to say the ultimate minority, the individual.
Yes.
So let's turn then, because we may possibly need to consider actually having you back on, because we've just spent, if you will, 30 or 40 minutes really just talking about the core issues, if you will, of the Frontier movement, the Frontier Project, the Frontier approach. Because there's an entire second side to this, and that was your engagement with the individual candidates.
Yes.
And your engagement with structuring campaigns, and your continued engagement with now three different really approaches within this project. Even within Wyoming, you're going to be cultivating additional new people to run. You've got folks that you hope will consider running again based on that initial level of success they had, that even though they're not winning. And then, to your earlier point, and we've started to raise this on the show, you've got to mount, if you will, and I hate to use the word, but it's really appropriate, a machine, libertarian style, hopefully, that will get folks reelected. Those are all even, before we even contemplate expanding the Frontier project into other parts of the country, which may be as nearly as hospitable, those are three undertakings, if you will, in and of themselves, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are definitely three very large projects, and that's not all we're doing either. We're focusing on the work with the campaigns is, I mean, it's my favorite part of the entire of the whole project. I love working with the campaigns. I love being out in the field. It's not terribly good conditions. So you really have to love the project. But yes, I work directly with them. I have 2 meetings a day with my candidates. I have one in the morning, one in the evening. We still continue those calls. This is for the legislative and to build the parties. 5 county parties already organically popped up out of this work. This after in 2015, the Wyoming party put an ad in the newspaper saying that they needed somebody to come and be their secretary, or they weren't going to be able to maintain their party status. So that's where they were in 2015 and where they are today. I will want to make one correction. We do this nationwide. We had helped candidates in Tennessee with Trish Butler. We helped candidates in South Dakota, Gideon Oaks. We are always looking for. We helped in Illinois. We got some resources to some races in Ohio. So we are looking consistently across the country. And the other piece that we want to do with this, because there is, or the other parts of this is supporting elected officials once they are elected. So we're currently working, so Frontier is in partnership with LESS, which is going to be the Libertarian Elected Support System that will be rolling out at the beginning of the year. It is an organization for elected officials to network with one another, to network with issue groups, state policy centers, to draft legislation, to discuss legislation, to create strategy plans or lobbying plans. That is a very large part of the next step. But yes, then there's creating the machine, which is building the infrastructure, increasing the number of voters in the precincts. And then the last thing for me, and this, I mean, one of my big objectives is creating. I want this to be national, but there's no way I can do it. There are thousands and thousands of elections. Karen and myself, we need more. So I'm really going to focus this year on trying to train campaign managers so that they can do what I'm doing across the country within their own states. So we're going to be identifying city council races, mayoral races, county commissioner races all across the country. We're going to try to match them with libertarian talent. And we're going to do an intensive program where I'm going to work with them on running these campaigns so that we can try to identify talent, train new talent, so that individual states can start creating similar approaches. So whether you're in Illinois or whether you're in Wyoming, whether you're in New York or North Dakota, there's always an opportunity for the Libertarian Party, but you have to find out what it is for your state. It might not be State House. It might not be. California has found tremendous success. It's not just Kalish-Maro. They were able to get a number of city council races. I'm not going to try to remember. I can barely even remember Kalish's name when I'm just looking at it. I have terrible names. Too many names in my head is what I mean. They had fantastic success. California did that with a similar approach that they came up with. And they did a great job. And so every state needs to be able to have the resources and the talent to be able to find their own opportunities and do this there, whether it be city council, maybe run an initiative. I had a member of the party email me today and say, there's a great opportunity for an initiative here in my city. It only takes X amount of signatures. Would you be willing to help me put something together? I said I would look over a campaign plan and give them my insights. There are opportunities everywhere.
You bring up an incredibly important point. I'm going to make this statement. I'd love your reaction to it. As important as it is to recruit candidates, it is equally important to recruit professionalized, to what degree we can, and trained campaign managers and campaign development / fundraisers, isn't it?
Oh yes. It's We have good candidates. We have good policies. We have good principles. We need more staff. We need people to execute. We need people that can be treasurers. We need to see people. We need people that can see trends. We need people that know how to manage social media. We need to grow. We need to grow the bench, and that's going to be a very big focus. Chairman Joe Bishop-Henchman is committed to expanding this. The LNC has been fantastic, and even factions within the party have been very. It's been very encouraging to see a renewed focus on success in elections.
I understand, and a number of the, if you will, caucuses raised money and found a way to donate money specifically to candidates who were displaying that sort of frontier spirit, if you will, even if they weren't necessarily located within Wyoming, and that was heartening, and it's a great unifier as well. Success. If people, it's sort of like sales. If people are selling, a lot of the petty stuff kind of disappears. And if people are getting elected or people are making spirited runs for office, a lot of the pettiness, the factions, the frustrations disappear because people are busy and they're happy and they're seeing success. Even if the candidate doesn't win, there were great candidacies in this past election where, again, they delivered the philosophy, unapologetic, unyielding, and every step that this project does at every level is a political statement, which then builds the entire movement, win or lose, particularly when it's done so professionally. It's we're just about out of time for tonight. I'm gonna put you under. If you can't come on with Marshall next week, I'd love to have you on again, because there's a whole second step that we can easily spend a half hour or 40 minutes on, and that's that next step, the execution of what we're talking about of doing, and which I think folks need to understand, number one, just on an intellectual level, because many of them have never had an opportunity to be really involved in campaigns. There's a dearth of experience, not willingness, not smarts, not work ethic, but just pure experience that you can share with us. And then again, that all so important opportunity to take advantage of Kalish's and Trish's and Kara's successes and Marshall's successes, to build upon that so that we retain that beachhead that folks have worked literally a generation for. And I use the term beachhead intentionally, because for a lot of folks who've been involved with the party 20, 30, 40 plus years, just to finally see these successes is really the culmination of a life's work. I always want to take the opportunity to pay homage to those folks who 40 plus years ago were marching alone in town parades, and let's just be honest, being made sport of, or the three people who for the last 15 years have been tabling at the same town picnic every year, getting the same sarcasm from the established parties. Your work and the work of the people in this project are really a testament to their efforts at building this sort of ground floor, even if it's taken us generations.
And I do, if I can, just very quickly, just say, Bethany Baldus is a third generation libertarian, and her dad has kept the Libertarian Party on the ballot in Wyoming for years and years. So seeing this success has been wonderful for him.
Right. And that's what we need to do. We say this every week. We need to celebrate and embrace the successes, because so often the work is so hard and there are so many challenges along the way. And that was actually the primary reason I wanted to have you on. A, to educate, have a conversation, but also get people fired up. There will be some elections in this year coming up, not a great deal, but we got to get ready already, because God knows the duopoly. We cannot expect to take them by surprise anymore, can we? They know we're out there, don't they?
They do.
And they're not sitting idly by, are they?
No, they're not. No, not at all. We're moving ahead, and I'm very excited for the future of the party.
All right. Can you join us next week or the week after, just to continue this conversation?
I will be on with Marshall. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we're folks, we're going to continue this next Friday, the class 2, if you will, in the second semester, if you will, of the Frontier Project. because I'd like to next week, if it's, if it works with you guys, is to really get into the nitty gritties of on a town by town basis, what you found out that was most successful for the, and again, understanding that there are some geographic issues in terms of, actual issues, policy, the nature of the type of communities are out there. But at the same time, there's clearly lessons that can be extrapolated out to the rest of the country. And that's where, that's where the details are. That's the special sauce that I think folks are hoping to take from this. And again, you use this like wildfire around the nation, the rest of the nation. So, I'd love to go in that direction. And certainly, you and Marshall raise the issues that you think need to be heard by Libertarian Nation. So I look forward to that. So thank you for joining us tonight. This has been nothing short of revelatory.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Tell folks, by the way, in the interim, and we always engage at the very end of the show in what we call shameless self-promotion. Tell folks how they can reach out to you to, most importantly, and this is where it gets tough. We, as a party, we are going to have to spend a lot of money this year because of the because of ballot access, and in states like New York, where they continue to move the goalposts despite the hard work of people like Larry Sharp, well, the entire state party. I got an opportunity to meet a lot of the candidates from New York and just talk about diligent, talk about hardworking, just leaving it all out on the field, and it's testament to their efforts that the duopoly has to engage in such chicanery in order to try to keep them off the field. So, and there's an enormous amount of money that's going to have to go back to ballot access because they keep screwing with us. So you need resources. I mean, look at what you were able to do, with what you had, which was great. But how much, how far in a state like Wyoming, based on your efforts and, your ability to teach people to work with, raw capital, a $100 donation, how far does that go? A $50 donation, a couple $100. How far did that go in your efforts?
Oh, absolutely. $100 donation is a third of what we're, you could get, you get 50 ad buys for that in Wyoming. You could purchase 5 or at least 50 yard signs. It's invaluable. You could get us our next door knocking, our next door knock campaign. Right. And you can donate to either Libertarian Party, the Libertarian Party, the National Party, or libertarianfrontier.com/donate. Those both go to supporting, it goes to supporting all of our projects, and it goes to supporting the Frontier Project.
And if folks want to donate to the Libertarian Party, they can earmark those funds for the Frontier Project, correct?
I believe so.
Right. So, again, think of these on one level as highly effective yard signs or ad buys. But I'll leave you with this thought for tonight. When you donate to a project like this, which is just so well run, that you're not just buying an ad, because an ad, you think about that candidate up there with the music and the distorted picture of the opponent and all that. Libertarian ads are also a way to demonstrate and take our philosophy and reach out to people who've never seen it before. So there's a duality, if you will, in that money that you spend for marketing because of all the questions that it prompts, all the people that it reaches out to for the first time, all the ways that folks can use this as a way to not just help someone get elected, but also to gain membership. We're a membership-driven organization nationally. We're a membership-driven organization in most states. And as a result, your investment, and it is an investment in this project, has the potential to yield so much. So Apollo, again, thank you for joining us tonight and just starting this message. Folks, again, we'll be back next week, 9:30. So we'll call it the, Frontier Project, lesson 2. And we'll really get into the nitty gritties. But again, it's been nothing short of revelatory. I thank you so much. And again, congratulations on your efforts. Congratulations on your wins. Congratulations on the hard-fought battles that have accomplished so much. It's just been, at every level, I would say, a phenomenal success. And my hat's off to you.